Cool. I hope that was really awesome getting to hear some of eavesdropping on some of the conversations, heard some awesome things, which is amazing. Heard some moving inside of Hoboken, which is cool. No moving outside of Hoboken. Or, sorry, surrounding area. But, yeah, and then I heard some expecting stories as well, and some coffee stuff. The guys were deep in coffee over here. I think this is the beautiful thing about story cards, though, is like the stories that come out from them are always so unexpected, which is really great. My favorite example of this once is there's a waterfall one in here somewhere. And I think the question was like, describe what your relationship with God is. And it was someone picked up the picture of the waterfall, and I, having done story cards forever, was like, oh, they're going to talk about how like things are beautiful right now and like it's scenic and great. And nope, they went with, I feel like I'm at the top of a waterfall and I see it coming and I have no way to stop and I know I'm going over the edge and like kind of thing. And it was just like, oh my gosh. And thankfully that was when I was leading a married group with Erica, and we were just like, all right, buckle in, let's go. Which was amazing with it. But it's really something that I think too, if you get in that connection period where things starting to feel a little stale-ish a little times, this is something that can really help with that. And then I think another really great tip with story cards is don't do what I just do and cut people off, right? Or that we're here at a certain time, we got to move over to our real questions or those kind of things. No, go with the engaging stuff. When you get to learn more about people, it really helps them to feel like they belong as a part of this group, and again, that they get to be heard. Which leads us right into this next session, which is all about like our foundations. Before we even do this, as silly as it sounds, like we're going to define what does a win of these dinner groups look like, right? So a win for a dinner group is that the win for a small group is to create an environment where people have the opportunity to pursue authentic community and spiritual growth. So are two things we're aiming at, right? Authentic community and spiritual growth. And the word I also love to point out inside of this is pursue, right? So the reason I use pursue in this, or the reason that we use pursue in defining the group win, is that we can't guarantee this, right? We can't guarantee that there will be authentic group or authentic community and spiritual growth, but we can hopefully provide that environment where there's chances to have that, and that one of the awesome things is later on today, Sarah, our hospitality expert, is going to come and share with us and teach us on how we can create these environments that really lead to that community being built, because we know when they start trusting one another, that spiritual growth is coming next. Cool. The other thing, too, I think, which is important about this is we don't just lead groups to host content, we lead them to shape lives, right? So it's not just that we are getting them into community and they feel like they have a place to belong. We're also doing this because we believe that Jesus is the way and the best way, and that he is our everything. And often people will be attracted by the community, right? And then we can introduce them to Jesus. I think we've seen this several times. I think about how what's really cool is watching so I don't know if Grant and John, they are two of our other old heads now at Hoboken Grace, but about, what was that, like 2017, 18-ish? So 7 years ago, they were really into pickleball. And you can obviously see that like pickleball is now. So if you think pickleball is embarrassing now, you should have seen what it was in 2017, because at least I don't have to define what pickleball is. Back then, they were just like, what the heck is this thing? But they use this as such an amazing vehicle to help connect and build community. I think it's really interesting because I'm on a lot of message boards in Hoboken, and the tennis community gets really upset at the pickleball people for various reasons. But one of the things that I think that I can clearly see that they're missing out on is that people are really attracted to pickleball because of the community that they are building inside of it. It's not as much of a one-on-one, but sort of team aspect. And it's really interesting how I've watched so many people go from that into the church and then into a group, which has been really awesome. So sorry for bringing pickleball into this, but that was just I was hearing a great win about that last night, and I was like, this is perfect for today. But anyways, yeah, so that's what we're doing. And then obviously, I think sometimes the opposite happens as well, right? We have that person, maybe like myself, who was pretty much like born on the altar, in a sense, has been in church his entire life, and hey, I'm here for the spiritual growth, and realizing, oh, like, I also need community. I can't do this by myself, right? And I think this is one of the T's that our current culture provides as well. Like, we have access to the absolute best pastors in the world, or maybe calling them pastors is interesting. We have the best teachers, right? And it's awesome, right? At any point, I can pull up Andy Stanley or go hear old Tim Keller sermons, or even have someone reenact stuff from Chesterton, or whoever those old heads are, right? But I think what's interesting is, for a lot of us, we probably remember our very first group, right? But we probably don't remember the sermon topic from that week when we first stepped into it, right? And that's no knock on what happens on Sunday, right? But I think it goes to show you how much having others in this journey makes an impact and difference in our lives. And so that's the big win we're trying to do here. So with that, there's 3 things that we love to value inside our small groups. One thing I didn't catch. So I've had this really cool opportunity where I now get to go teach other churches about small groups. And there's a bunch that say small groups in here, and that's because I forgot to change it back to dinner groups. Observation, probably I only noticed, and could have just left behind. But yeah, we have 3 values. When you're a part of our trainings, we love to do our celebrations around this, but it's connect the unconnected, help people take next steps, and reproduce groups and leaders. Connect the unconnected. So how do we define unconnected? We're talking about anyone who just doesn't have an immediate community. A lot of the times, this is people who are attending on Sunday, and we are helping them to be a part of either our groups or our teams. Our connection events are a big anchor in part of this connecting the unconnected and helping people find a place to belong is kind of our mission here inside of our community team. Inside that. Next one, helping people take next steps. We're going to talk a little bit on what growth looks like, but part of growth is taking a next step. So what's really interesting about this for me, so when I moved to Hoboken, I was working at JP Morgan, and I had grown up going to church, so church was like a habit thing, and I kind of had this gospel of surround yourself with good people and good things will happen, right? So I recognized it felt like where I was working weren't the best of people, not that they themselves were bad, but like just heavy party, work hard, play hard, and just I couldn't keep that pace. I still can't party hard. I can socialize hard, but partying as a whole, it just doesn't work. And then leadership agreement, obviously. But what's interesting is like, all right, so where are you looking for good people? Oh, church. So I came to church, and I was really inconsistent with it. At the time, I was like, oh, these sermons aren't that great or whatever. I'm not getting much from them. Meanwhile, it's like, part of it's because like I'm learning from a 28-year-old at the time. And so like time has is played in this. But what's interesting is Jeff Bunce, who was a part of this church, he recently moved about a year or so ago. He was a group leader for us. He invited me to come to dinner group. And so my first dinner group was at Arthur's on 3rd and Washington, and loved it, right? The first night I was like, oh my gosh, these are my people. They're so mature. They know what they're doing. The way they talk about their spouses or significant other is incredible. I want this in my life. I need to learn from them and figure out how to be like them. And I'm so thankful for them because they were my first step, right? My first step was going to group, and then my first step was then making it consistent. That was my next step. And my when I took that step to be consistent, I was like, had to go to work and be like, hey, I need to get off early so that I can be home by 8 o'clock for this group thing. And my boss, thankfully, was like, yeah, sure, take off, just make sure your work gets done. And so I started to see the difference Monday was making in my life. And I was like, all right, now I need to make Sunday a priority in my life. Now, the hard thing for me is I grew up in Pittsburgh, and we all love the Pittsburgh Steelers. And one of our best teams ever was that same year, one of the best defenses of all time, the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers. Can't miss them, right? But we're an evening church on Sunday afternoon, and because we're elite at the time, we kept getting these 4 o'clock games, which meant I had to DVR football games. Literally, my next step of faith was DVRing a football game. And I say that so that you guys can laugh at that, because I think sometimes we look at these steps and we're just like, oh, it's got to be baptism. It's got to be like all these like really big things. And sometimes it starts with those little ones, right? Hey, do you think that maybe you could watch it later, right? Do you think that you could turn off your phone? All these kind of things. What's interesting about this as well is, again, showing age, I've now also had to explain what DVR is. So this is where we used to like record. At the time was revolutionary technology. That was the other thing too with that. And the other thing that doesn't stand, or like back to 2008, when I tell this, is that I used to not have to worry about text spoilers or like pop-ups on the phone. It used to just be like you could miss the game and still catch it and not have spoilers. So now that's pretty much impossible. And then the last one is reproducing groups and leaders. So a thing I always love to point out on this one, reproducing groups and leaders, not group leaders, right? Our job is the whole church, right? Not just our groups and our community teams and stuff. Obviously, you know me, I would love as many group leaders as possible, but I know it takes all of us. It takes First Impressions, it takes Grace Kids, it takes Vibe, it takes production, everything that goes into that. So we want to encourage people to take those kind of steps inside of that. The other thing that I would tell you is it is also valuable. Like when you can help people get to that leadership step, those people will be anchors in your group as well. So there's a lot of value in that. But this is something that we all take on. So connect the unconnected, help people take next steps, reproduce groups and leaders with that. This is, again, my daughter, Emmeline. So the next thing I want to talk about is the tensions that we face, right? So my daughter, Emmeline, has learned to ride her bike. What's interesting is I only have video of my daughter riding a bike. I don't have photos. This is the only photo I have of her on a bike. But the reason I wanted to use this is that groups is a lot about managing tensions and having balance, right? And I think a bicycle really explains this well, so I'm going to use my daughter because she's cute to explain this illustration. But one of the things that you learn when you're teaching a child to ride, one of the things that's really cool now is that balance bikes are super popular. And the advantage of the balance bike is that if you can teach a kid to balance on the bike, the pedals are easy, right? I think there's a lot of similarities with this when it comes to groups. I think there's a lot of things that we need to balance. We already talked about authentic community and spiritual growth. That's going to be something that you're going to have this kind of tension with. And so there's two main tensions that every leader faces. First one is community versus content, right? These aren't things that oppose each other, but they're things that you kind of have to manage the tension between. Community being like, all right, like, we talked a little bit this before with the authentic community. The content piece is like all the learning stuff that we do, whether that's like the discussion questions or whether that's a book that you're reading or whether it's the discipleship side of it. So community, relationship, content being discipleship in a sense. So for me, my first time leading was in the fall of 2009. It actually was like April. But I have a really interesting story for another time. You should ask me how I first started leading, because I got like bait and switch in a sense. Like my guy was like, I was like, I guess I'm going to tell a story. So my group leader was this guy named Steve. And Steve, I brought up, I was like, hey, I would really love to read this book have you ever heard this book? And he's like, oh, you should lead this in our group. And I led it, and then he left. So that's how I became a group director, was I suggested a book and then left, and then the other guy left, and now you have me for 17 years. But it came to the fall, right? I had 12 guys in my group, and it's Monday night, so it's like, oh, we can watch football. We'll just talk at halftime. And I took a group of 12 all the way down to a group of 4. And why? Because I had forgotten about this tension of community versus content. Like, they can go and watch a football game anywhere. What's stopping them from going to watch it at McSwiggin's or somewhere else, right? People are in your group because they want to talk about Jesus, right? They know that this is an element with it as well. At the same time, if you come in and you're creating a classroom as opposed to creating, like, managing that tension, you're not going to, the same kind of problem is going to exist, right? If you're not able to build community and if it comes in there and it's just a strict teacher and it's like that kind of thing, wrong format. So we're going to try to manage that tension. The next one, this one's even a little bit harder. It's intimacy versus inclusion. So intimacy being that we're trying to get to know each other on a deeper level, and then inclusion being that we're welcoming more people in here into this. Now, I know you guys as group leaders probably don't struggle with the inclusion as much as the people inside of your group do, right? And so you're going to have to fight that off. It gets really hard. And I think the reason that it's hard is because of what we talked about at the start. Like, these groups are really rare in our culture. And people find it and they go, oh my gosh, I finally found it. And then someone goes, hey, we're working towards creating more of these things. And they go, absolutely not. Like, blocking it out. And I think you should talk to Sarah at some point. She has some real fighters in her group that, like, she's announced groups and they've been like, no. Which has been really awesome. But the tension in this, right? What happens if we lean too much into intimacy? I don't know that we really truly execute the mission of God, who is the one or of Jesus, who demonstrated multiplication for us. Like, when he went to the cross, like, we were able to have community with God because of that act and brought that to us. I think the other thing too is if we're leaning too much into inclusion, people don't get a chance to be known. And then I think the other thing that goes with that, not just them getting to be known, but they feel like they don't need to be there. I think it's part of that as well, of the tension, right? Where it just feels like we had a 90-minute group. I got to talk for 3 minutes maybe, or 2 seconds kind of thing. So I think that's the other thing with that tension. And then the last thing I'll say about intimacy versus inclusion. Oh, this past summer was really interesting. A lot of our groups were exhausted, like I talked about before. And Christian and I were still doing connection events, like hardcore. Christian was in my group. It's only weird now because now he works for me, and it was weird that we were both in the same group. But the thing that we both decided on doing was, like, everyone's invited. Every single guy. So, like, we would meet people from, like, May through June, and if they say, we would bump into them and be like, hey, which group are you a part of? And they'd be like, I'm not in one yet. We would just say, oh, just come join mine, like, kind of thing. And we had built up our group, I think in the summer, up to 18 in a sense. And what was awesome about that was, like, summers, obviously kind of inconsistent attendance. But what was really cool is now it made it super easy for Christian to launch his own group out of that. And so both of us have, how many are in your group right now? 10? Yeah, he's got 10, I've got 12. And so it's just really awesome to see building that momentum at the last minute, in a sense, and then being able to kind of start fresh in that regard. Maybe one of the lessons learned from this as well is there a season in which you can kind of ramp up towards the end and start bringing in a few more people? I know that Jean did this as well with a few couples, like in the past, like, month of her group, just adding them in and then being able to have kind of that fresh start into that new year. So, cool. All right, next thing. I would love for us to get on the same page about spiritual growth and what we think about this. So I'm going to break this into a couple different areas. We're going to talk about what do we believe about spiritual growth? So what are our views on this? How do we talk about it? What are some of the languages that we have around it? who's responsible for it, and then how do we deliver on it, which is kind of like our strategy in that. So first thing, growth is a movement. But growth is two things. Growth is a movement, and, well, growth is a lot of things. I shouldn't say just that. But the first one I want to talk about is growth is a movement. So really this is any step forward is, I was just sharing before about the value of helping people take their next steps. That's obviously going to come through growth. So any step forward is growth, and every step forward is progress with that. How can we tell if someone is growing? Well, the first thing that I would say is that growth is visible. We have two pieces of scripture that I think really point this out kind of clear, and I just love these two. First one is Galatians 5:6, and it says, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. So expressing itself through what? Love, right. All right, John 13:35. In this, to set this up, so Jesus is being asked, like, hey, how are they going to know that we're, at the term they didn't have it, but how are they going to know we're Christians, right? So John 13:35 says, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you one another, right? So love everyone, or love one another. So both of these, right? Faith is being expressed through love, and then the other one is that it's going to be demonstrated, right? That you can see it. A few other things that we believe about growth. First one is that God is relational. I think that he really designed this to be a family system, right? He could have created any system that he wanted to, but it's very clear even from the start, even with Adam. I think one of the coolest things with the story of Genesis is in Genesis 2. Obviously, creating the world's really awesome, and people. But he creates Adam, and he's going through the list of everything that's good, and then he gets to Adam, and he goes, this is not good, right? And what's interesting about him saying this is not good is that the fall hasn't happened yet. There's been no sin. So for him to say, man, this is not good, that he needs someone else, is really powerful in that we need each other. I think the other thing that's amazing when you look at God is that he also lives in community, right? The Holy Spirit, Jesus, God, which is there as well. He lives in community and created us for relationship with him and others with that. Next one is that growth is a process, that it's not just linear, right? I think sometimes it gets really easy for us, especially in a church like ours, which is done in a very professional community, that we're going to have a path and we're going to have this step and all these kind of things that go with it, and it's got to be in order. It's not linear, right? It is a lifelong journey with Jesus, and I think that this gets really reflected when circumstances hit our lives, right? Where it's just I'm going to need to grow in this area of my life, or something along that. Next one is growth is multidimensional. You can give me a pat on the back for not just spelling it correctly, but then just saying that. But I realize, sorry. It's hard when you bomb. So, multidimensional, what do I mean by this? This is that loving God with everything and loving other people who love life. So we're going to talk when we get to the 5 purposes, but this is a reflection of when the great commandment is when they're asking Jesus, hey, what is the greatest commandment of them all? And he says, all scripture points back to this: love God, love others, right? So multidimensional meaning that it's vertical, right, in how we love God, and then it's also horizontal in how we love others inside that. And then the next one I think is just crucial. I think this is the one where you as group leaders have a great front row seat to this. And I know from a distance this can seem intimidating, but this is that God uses pivotal circumstances. And so what this means is that people can learn through our Sundays, they can learn through their private time in their private rhythms, right? Reading the Bible, memorization, fasting, all these kind of things. They can learn through their dinner groups and the people that they're a part of. And they can learn, there's a fourth one I can't remember, but one of the ones I think that is one that we can't control is our circumstances. And yet God uses every single one of those to grow us. And I think a lot of the times it's him showing us how much he is with us and how much he has provided for us. Yeah, so really cool part of that. Let me give you just a quick example on the circumstances. Last time I did this was 2019. The night before was a night that I'll never forget. I was at the mall getting stuff last minute for the conference the next day, and a shooting happened about 75 feet away from me with Marcus, and then had to get out of the building as quickly as possible, which is a whole adventure in itself. But something I never planned for, right? And it's been interesting how much God has been using people and using himself to teach me more about him, even through that process. And it's interesting where now if you'd ask me like, hey, what's the hardest thing that ever happened to you? I would tell you about that day, right? But what's interesting is I had a great friend, Wayne is really the one who asked me this. Wayne's a part of a Rich and Rose group. He asked me like, what's the event you've seen God work the most? And I told him the exact same thing, which I think he knew is what I would say, like trying to help me with that. And he was like, would you take it back? And it's just like, yes, but at the same time, like the amount of growth that came through it. But anyways, all this to say, I've been thinking about that a lot. I was thinking about it all day yesterday, but like I've learned, like in the past, I used to just keep that to myself, right? All right, just tough it up, be strong, like kind of thing. And yesterday, like getting to reach out to people who I know love me and will be praying for me was super powerful to be able to do that. And so don't underestimate those pivotal circumstances, right? They're going to be hard, but God's going to show up every time. I'm confident about that. And then the last one, which might be one of the most important, is that God's Spirit does the transforming. We're going to go into this a little bit more when we talk about the roles, but we create the space, he changes the hearts, right? We create the space, he changes their hearts inside that. And then the last one is that everyone has a purpose, right? Which leads us into our 5 purposes. God has called every person to himself on purpose, for a purpose. So let's talk about the 5 purposes. If you have not read The Purpose-Driven Life, I give you a little QR code if you ever want to download it. There's probably copies floating around here if you're cheap. Or Supposia used to have all of our copies that we used to hand out. So there's a lot there as well. But anyways, what's amazing about the Purpose-Driven Life is it has been a really good thing of giving us kind of language to talk about how we're trying to grow, because I think there's 5 key areas in which we're trying to grow. I believe these are kind of the 5 purposes of someone's life. And so you might be wondering, like, where do these even come from? Well, they come from 2 passages. One is the Great Commandment. So again, I set this up a little bit before, but I didn't read the actual verse. But so Jesus is being asked by others, like, hey, which is the greatest law, Jesus? Which is the ones that we, like, what's the most important? And it's this. It's so Matthew 22, 37 to 39. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love the neighbor as yourself. All of the laws of the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. So we get 2 of our purposes from this one. The first being the love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and with all your mind. This is worship, right? Worship is more than just singing, right? I think worship is a lot about adoration, right? How much we love and value and appreciate God inside that. I think this is one of the coolest things. My wife loves prayer. We used to hold prayer nights way back in the day. She still leads prayer. If you're ever off on Fridays, she leads free plug. Or working from home on Fridays. Stop by here. noon. She leads it every day. We have a crew. But back in the day, we used to, what? Friday. Thank you. Every Friday at noon. But one of the things we used to do was break it into a thing called acts, which is adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. The adoration part is really cool because it comes from the Lord's Prayer, which is just the Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So that's that adoration piece in worship that we're talking about. Next one is love your neighbor as yourself, right? This is the service. Service at Hoboken Grace looks a lot, mainly on our different teams that we have, but it also looks in like how you're loving your neighbors at home or at your work community, those kind of things inside of that. Let's jump to the next one, Great Commission. Great Commission comes after the cross, right? Jesus has been resurrected. He comes back. I can't remember what he says that sets this up, but he's, hey guys, I'm back. This is the game plan, all right? Here's the game plan. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded to you, and surely I am with you always to the end of the age. So first one, go and make disciples. This is share. I forgot to tell you, we have, if you read Purpose-Driven Life, we have changed some of the language. This used to be evangelism, is a church word that you've kind of heard. One of the reasons that you might be like, why do you change the language? We care deeply about those who don't know Christ yet, and we love to use the language that they're familiar with because we think it's a much easier teaching than it is to say evangelism and go, huh? Everyone knows what it's like to share your story or to share who you are or share what you believe. And so that's one of the reasons we changed the language. Next one is baptizing them. This is where we get the community piece. And then the last one is teaching them to obey. This is what they call discipleship. At Hoboken Grace, with our purposes, we just call it learn. Discipleship is all-encompassing. Discipleship does not need to start at baptism. Discipleship starts from wherever they're at, which is awesome. So with that, we end up getting 5, which is worship, learn, serve, share, and connect. And the reason I want to teach you guys this is that this is what I want like us to think about and how we are kind of balanced inside of our groups, right? I think if we end up focusing on one of them, this is where it's kind of, from a global church perspective, this is where I see groups go stale, is one of the things. Often what you'll see in churches is they'll set up groups based on different things. So some of them will set them up based on just like that connection one. So we're like, all right, we all play volleyball, we all do pickleball together kind of thing. And the worship ones would be like a prayer group, right? They get together and they're just going to pray every single week. The next one is learn, which is like Bible study. So they come together and they're doing, usually it's around a book is what most churches do. The serve one is where some churches will do it where your team is your group, right? So you serve in that way. And the last one is share. There's this thing, it was popular in the 2010s, but I haven't heard of it much anymore. It's called missional communities, where like you just start your small group and you just invite your neighbors, and that's the whole thing. But you're probably hearing those things and like, Nick, those are all good things. What I would say is that like, what I see from a lot of this is that those groups last for about 6 to 9 months, right? And I think what ends up causing the like 6 to 9 months is I feel like after you're in it for a certain amount of period, there's this, I need to go learn like this thing. So I'm going to go over to this one and then I'm going to jump in this other one. And so what we're trying to build here is something that's all encompassing, right? That it's including all of these different things. We obviously have our equip department and our Bible studies, which are phenomenal. And we have our prayer team that is meeting. We have all of our teams and all these things, other things to go with it. And I don't want you to hear, oh, Nick said just doing one of those is bad. No, it's all of them. All of them is what I'm looking for inside this. Cool. The last thing I want to talk about here is what is the role everyone plays with this? I'm sorry for the tiny print on this, but it's in your book if you want to follow along. So there are 4 different roles inside of a dinner group. I think if you understand this, I think this really unlocks you as a leader, and I think your group. I have been working on communicating this point as well inside of my own group, because I think it's important when they know this as well. So the four different roles are the individual, the group, the leader, and the church, right? Those are the 4 roles, and each one has a different role inside of spiritual growth. So the first one is that every individual has to own their own spiritual growth. So what we mean by this is that only they can take that step of faith, right? You can't take it for them. You can't get baptized on their behalf. Like, only you can take that step. So this is really important for you as a group leader, right? Because I think sometimes we step into groups and someone has this burden or someone has this thing that they need to do spiritually, and you're like, you just start wearing it, right? Oh my gosh, I'm going to get to heaven, and they're going to be like, how come Samantha hasn't been baptized? No, that's the question that's going to be asked to Samantha, right? And I think that that's really important to know, right? As I go through this, I'll release the tension of the stress here in a second. So the next part is the group itself. The group itself is here to support one another in each other's spiritual growth, right? So how do they support? I just learned this recently, group support through what's called the ABCs, which is accountability, belonging, and care. So accountability being that, like, hey, people are going to show up and be there to walk through this with you. Belonging, making sure that you have a place where you are accepted and welcomed in. And then care is like people who are going to be, obviously I just said the same thing 3 times. They're going to care for you and do their best to help you through this. When we go into Show Up, Join In, Be Real, it'll really explain this out a little bit more. That'll come in Sarah's section later in the thing. And then your role as the leaders. I think this one is a game changer. When I first heard this, I was just like, this is it. Because you'll hear churches and you'll hear things try to wrestle through, what is that group leader? What is their thing? And most people think that, like, they need to be an expert, right? Like, I should be the expert, or I need to be a facilitator, or I need to be, like, all these kind of things. The role that I want you to play most is encourager. If you can be a great encourager, you can be a great group leader inside of this. And a lot of this is because people want to follow someone. Oh, sorry. Let me back up a little bit. So what does encouragement look like, right? I think there's a couple different things that encouragement looks like. I think encouragement looks like when you don't know something, admitting it and being like, I'm unsure about that. Let's go figure that out together, right? That's encouraging. When you run into something, it's interesting in my role how I have conversations often with new group leaders or people who are potentially being group leaders. And it's been rare now that someone says something that I haven't heard before, but I had one happen this summer, which was awesome. And the group leader was like, I feel like I'll be a hypocrite if I lead. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is exactly what we're looking for as a group leader. I'm not looking for hypocrites, by the way. But what I told her, or what I told them, was, I was like, no, are you willing to step into group and say, this is really hard for me. I'm going to need your support on this. Like, that is leadership, and that is encouraging, I think, inside of that. And the reason why I want that person to come in and say, I don't know, or I'm unsure about that, or I don't know where the church stands on that. Let's go figure that out. Let's go set up time with Pastor Anthony or someone other than me to have those conversations. Sorry, that was another joke, didn't land. And this all boils down to because people want to follow someone that's real, not someone who's right? And so this is what we're looking for in leadership. And the last one is the church. The church's role is to partner with you guys in this process. So we were talking about that tension earlier of, like, how, if I can't do it, like, how are they going to? We want to come alongside you in this journey. So several ways that we partner with our group leaders here to help you encourage your group to support one another in their own spiritual growth is the coaches that are provided to you. They are a great resource. You obviously have Christian and myself as well. One of the things inside this leader assistance that if you don't know this about me, I am like a logistical nut and am addicted to efficiency and systems and all these kind of things. Like that's where my brain is. If you ever want to try to like figure out a process inside of your group, or you want help scheduling something, or maybe it's even like the seating chart of a baby shower or something, come find me. Like I have this weird gift of knowing like where people need to sit or who would connect best, those kind of things. And so I would love to help you out on those kind of things, right? So logistics stuff that way. I can help with the relationship stuff. I've heard a ton of the stuff over the 17 years. However, your coaches are also selected because they're also phenomenal at those kind of things, and so they would love to help you out. We have our care department. Man, are they phenomenal. Anthony's team, John runs our counseling center. We now, I think, 5? How many professional counselors do we have? 3? 5? 4? 2 and a social worker, plus John. So 3. 3 and a social worker. Licensed counselors. So that's the other thing. I think people have heard about our counseling center. We have licensed counselors. Really important to know that. It makes a huge difference. The thing I would tell you, you guys might want to write this down. I don't think I put it in there. How do I know like when to escalate? The line is, if it's beyond what a friend would do, escalate it, right? A friend is going to set up a meal train for someone. A friend is going to host a baby shower for them. A friend is going to read the book of Romans with them because they're struggling with being such a rule follower. A friend is going to pray with them when they've had a hard day, right? But a friend is not going to walk them through a rupture in their marriage and is like heading towards divorce, right? That requires a professional. A friend is not going to help them with trauma stuff or things like that, right? We want to escalate those things. I would even say, yeah, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. Next one is pastoral guidance, right? Theological issues always come up. I think with our culture, there's always a new hot topic every single week, and you're like, how do I stay on top of all these things? This is why we got people with their MDivs downstairs. Chris and Anthony they're in these conversations all the time. They love having them. Well, love is probably... They're willing to sit with someone who's curious and open to learning and hearing what the Bible has to say about issues. That's the thing they love. But they have them frequently, and they're always usually in a one-on-one or one-on-two kind of setting, so it's not, oh, come attend this or whatever kind of thing. Next one is all the different spiritual growth opportunities. Anna is in charge of our Equip department now, which is the one that hosts all of our Bible studies and things like that. You saw that huge booklet that we had this weekend. There are so many amazing opportunities inside this church. We're also going to talk about how you can bring some of those opportunities into your group in the next session. And then the last one is all of our teams. So if you look at the purposes, like you're going to need our teams as well to kind of help out with all of the different things that we have. And then the last one is even like our mission trips, right? So we have Danielle over here who organizes them. Might be a wild idea, but like maybe your group does a mission trip, right? Or she also does like our simple service and things like that. Like these are different opportunities that you guys have to go and really kind of live out this walk of faith. I'm going to give you guys a break. We're going to get back together at 11. I realize it's kind of quick. But come find me if you have questions. But yeah, let's take a quick break. Grab some snacks if you want, or refill your drinks. And we'll start again at 11.